I think irony is coming to life in a cemetery, walking around, almost gloating to the dead, showing off. Do they look up at me in envy? Do they care? Or rather, do they look down on me in disgust? As a sinner, maybe somebody who never had a chance. I walk this all the time for a lot of reasons. It's almost a perfect fourth of a mile around. But I also pass a bunch of old friends that I have lost in my 32 years. All of them to car wrecks, oddly enough. It's enough to make a man never want to drive again. But the cemetery, well, at one point in my past, every one of them, including myself, played in the field. At some point in the past 3 decades, we all were in this field alive together. And now a good majority of them have fallen and are here with me in flesh. Oh, it's cold. I compartmentalize by speaking. And so I don't want to talk to nothing. I want to talk to something. And so this is where I do it. Except this time I may upload what I'm saying, maybe as kind of a daily vlog. Nothing flashy, nothing to catch your attention, but more as a means to compartmentalize. Out here I am alone. The other part of the irony would be to upload that to the world. No longer would it be alone. But perhaps due to the inflation of YouTube bloggers and prominent minds and whatnot, perhaps amongst them it will stay hidden. I was always that way anyway with the internet. I wanted a community, literally community. When you say community, the definition and the reality of a community are two different things. You look at a township as a community with a town square, where you went to the store and knew everyone's name. That's a community. A community is not New York City, but again, it draws similar ties as a square, right? Times Square. But the chances of walking through Times Square and knowing a soul are so slim. So, a community, that's what I want. And I had that. I had a community. The number said something around 20,000, but in reality it was a good handful of people that weren't lurkers or didn't just sit by the wayside. And then I found even more. So, I don't know. At this point, it becomes rambling, but I think there's something there. Problem is that I run out of people to talk to. It's hard to talk to people that know you for real. One of the biggest benefits I had back in the day was talking to people who were disconnected tangibly from my life thousands and thousands of miles away. And I could tell them anything. There was always this carefree feeling about a friend that existed in voice alone. Yeah, it would be rough to lose them. But if you did, it'd be the same as turning a computer off or breaking. At least that was my thought initially. I gained pretty tight relationships with some of the people I met there. Some of them I met in real life. And that's been neat. There are 7 of them out here. 7 of my old friends. And I miss them. Sometimes I kind of envy what they have. Not in a sense to alert in a century riddled with all kinds of mental illness and awareness. That's what I do for a living. I envy some of the things that they did with their lives. And I envy knowing as much as they knew each other. They were all very close. At some point, I just didn't fit in anymore. Oddly enough. And this is profound. It's something that really struck me one day. While walking, I came to the realization that with every one of them, I spoke to every single one of them within the hour that they died in some measure. And they didn't die close together. Well, that's subjective, but I mean, they years apart. But each one of them, in some sort of serendipity, they reached out to me or ran into me and they spoke with me. Isn't that something? One of them I ran into at school the last time he would ever leave it. And we'd been friends in middle school and hadn't talked to each other for a lot of time, which was just a good call on my part. He got into drugs and had been arrested and sent off to boot camps. He wanted to play the cool kid, and he did. He did a good job of it. Cool kids don't wear their seatbelts. Cool kids want to go fast around corners. We should hang out sometime, I said. There was zero intention of ever hanging out with him. I wouldn't have known what to do. I didn't like that kind of life. But he did. And it killed him. The other, she loved me so much. I loved her too in a very different way. We've been friends, well, all of us have been friends since I can remember. But she really liked me. Huge crush ever since we were kids. And it broke her heart when I got married. Just destroyed her. And in May of 2009, hadn't seen her in a long time, she reached out to me on Facebook. Was no messenger or anything at the time. I just saw it on my computer, and we chatted and back and forth, and we planned dinner across the street at her parents' house. I asked her what she was doing now, and she said, I'm going to see someone. And I asked some open-ended question because I enjoyed speaking with her, and I never got a reply. And a couple hours later, my mother calls me and tells me that she had been killed. You can imagine my utter confusion. I just spoke with her. What are you talking about? Where the hell did you hear that from? It wasn't until she told me that her mother had called I started to believe that it wasn't bullshit. Wasn't really honestly set in for quite a few sleepless nights. Huge fear that I have is that I've never been put into a surreal state of grief before in my life. But I know I'm capable of feeling it. So, the entire time, I've surrounded myself with death in some way. It started out being traumatized by it, obviously. But then I kind of relished it, that feeling. And I realized it was probably my inner self trying to come to terms with all the death that I was to experience someday. Back then, it was my mother, my father, my brothers, my grandparents. Those were the key players. They were the ones that I loved and cherished the most. And as I've gotten older, I've become more at grips with mortality. You start to expect death in loved ones. My grandparents are very healthy. I'm 32, no telling how old they are, and they're still kicking pretty good. Knock on wood. But now it's my children. Now it's them. Now I'm mortified, catastrophizing constantly about their well-being. So I have to take preventative measures. I have to do things that I don't want to do as a means to kind of train myself not to get anxious. I know myself pretty well, and I know how to deal with it. As we speak, he sits inside. He's sick as a dog. While I walk around this damn circle through this giant cemetery. But my point is this. I fear that more than anything in this world. I came to terms with my own death a long time ago. And then, when you have children that you love, when you have children that you place at the center of your life, their loss becomes a weight on you. The thought of it. Maybe this is a means to keep them safe, but you can't stop the inevitable thing, and so even talking about it hurts. And So I just bring it back to this. It inevitably comes around and it makes me think of that every time I see the tombstones of my former friends, where their bodies lay. I think of their parents and how much, how do you live through it? Like, I deal with suicide every single day. I deal with the real mental illness every single day. I talk to people who want to die every single day. And you'd think it gets sad, but it really just becomes a routine. And then you get to a point where you start to pick your own brain, especially if you don't understand it, I imagine. I do understand it. I do. But I start to think, well, what would drive me to kill myself? What would drive me to pull the trigger? Losing my kids. Shit, even one of them. I can't imagine what I would do. I can. I mean, I can't imagine how I could move on. I'm one of those people that I don't properly grieve. We don't just grieve death. We grieve lots of things. But I don't properly grieve anything. Proper grief is very, well, there are processes to it. I completely avoid feeling it. I run from that feeling. I stay completely away, which sets me up for a horrible failure later in life, or later in the process. At some point, enough time passes, you fill this up with enough other bullshit that it's just not a big deal anymore. Or you hit an apex moment, something like that, like losing a child. And if you're like me, the entirety of your life since the day you first looked at them and held them has been about them. Everything, every picture you've taken, anyone with substance, maybe, to me, any video you've taken, every ice cream flavor you tasted, every movie you saw, every preview, every article on Reddit about a new video game, shit, every video game, every single awesome boss battle, every single hard level beaten, every single dad, can you help me? All of it revolves around these children, these little kids. And even if you're like me and you don't get emotionally attached to things at all, you fall for them, and well, I don't imagine you could do much running from that. Well, you see what I'm saying. You couldn't do much running from that here. You'd have to have escaped it. I have every intention of talking to you about those things at some point. All the intention in the world of talking about my philosophies on life and death. I just found a place to do it. Way out here, where I do have an audience. But they can't judge me. I've made a lot of mistakes. Well, I've made a lot of interesting choices in life. I'm only 32. I can only imagine how the rest is going to go. I wish I had a venue to talk about that. I wish I had a way to vent it. I think this might be it. There's a channel for me when I put the mask on. I just need a channel for me when I take it off. When I've walked God knows how far. When I can't feel my hands anymore, they're frozen solid, and I just keep going. It literally pains me to stop. It hurts me to stop walking. I don't want to. The only reasons I have wanting to go back is to check on my kids. You can only imagine how far I walk when they're not with me. I can see into the window, though. Sometimes I may not have anything to say. Sometimes maybe I'll just walk. I can't see very well without my glasses on up close, so nothing else. It looks like, feels like I'm talking to someone. That smell is very nostalgic. It's a dryer. The dryer exhaust in the winter. It seems to travel so far. There's a car coming. I wonder what they have to say. They are most assuredly coming toward me. No, they turned. Oh, damn it. Thought I was going to get to be social. So disappointed. Oh, I often see cars driving through here and I don't know what they're doing. There used to be a house over here. This kid named Willie lived there. All names, by the way, of any persons alive or dead will be changed. But Willie was a prick. Willie didn't know any better. Anyway, they tore his house down. I didn't start recording this until I had walked for, I don't know, 2 hours. Been recording half an hour. I better go check on him. I don't want to. Like I said, I want to continue walking. When he isn't with me, I get lost in my head. I found myself so far away. You know, it's like driving. If you've ever driven and you make it home or you make it to wherever you're going, and you don't really remember the drive. It's like that. Except there is no destination. The destination's always to make it back home. Ooh. Well, even in our masochism, we should practice some vigilance. When faced with two pains, choose the one you don't want.